Obviously, I'm Sue Murray, Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust from Dunedin. So it's a great pleasure to be here, my first experience of being at one of these meetings. So I'd just like to firstly introduce the Trust to you. We're obviously a charity formed in 1987 due to the decline of the endangered yellow-eyed penguin, and our aim was to rebuild the population to a self-sustainable level through revegetation of their nesting habitats. We now enjoy a national and international recognition. We're based in Dunedin, as I said, but we actually work wherever yellow-eyed penguins are found, which is basically along the southeastern coast of New Zealand. We're administered by a trust board of 9 volunteers, and at the moment we have 4.5 full-time equivalent employees, or 7 people. We run an extensive coastal conservation program, and if you've got my pamphlet, you'll read more about that. We have a current turnover of 370,000, but we're very asset-rich, mainly with land, 1.6 million. And our brand statement is "They're committed to creating natural environments where threatened yellow-eyed penguins can thrive." And our little tagline is PPPP, Penguins, Plants, People and Passion.
Right, my name's Alan White. I'm the Biodiversity Fund Manager, and I am based in the National Office of the Department of Conservation. I run the Biodiversity Funds. They're a contestable fund. We distribute around about 3.6 million per year, and during our relationship with the Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust, we've distributed around about $660,000 to the Trust. The actual objectives that I'm working to come from the Biodiversity Strategy, which was adopted by government in 2000. It has a 2020 deadline in terms of achieving a halt in the decline of New Zealand's Indigenous biodiversity. My focus in terms of funding is private land, so it's private land only, no government land, and the key focus are community groups such as the Trust and also private landowners.
So as Alan said, we've received approximately 600,000. The first application was successful in 2003, and since then 8 different projects have been funded. For us, that was the equivalent of 13 years' employment, which was huge, plus associated costs. So we're just going to go through the different stages of the code, and first being about the fairness in selection. Since 2003, there's been huge improvements moving on to, through clarity, mainly of the definitions of the 2 different funds that are available. And funding criteria has relaxed as, I suppose, as the needs have changed from the different groups as well.
So in terms of my funds team, it's only a small team, about 1.6 people. We carve people up and dock. We have a real strong emphasis on communication and connection with our client groups, and there's an emphasis on our toll-free 0800 service. We put that in 2004, and it's used extensively because we have applications from the North Cape to Bluff. In terms of the information requirements, applicants are guided by the application forms, which are template type, but we certainly look at balancing those in terms of our needs to make good decisions at a national scale, but also the demands on the actual applicants. In terms of the trust itself, the things we need to know is what are the current threat statuses of yellow-eyed penguin, what are the management issues that are really challenging the trust, and what are the agency collaborations, who are they working with? And our forms are designed to actually get that information.
The objectives from the fund are very clear, and that's helped enormously with the move or the transition from brochure to web, where it's able to have clear updates, easy access, etc. Things like the non-funded purposes eligibility are very clearly stated. As Alan's mentioned, the toll-free number is a huge bonus because obviously no cost to us. We're lucky enough that we get a lot of technical advice through local branches of the department, but of course we always must be very mindful, like anybody, that our project actually fits the criteria of the fund in the first instance.
And so for the fund, certainly the website, a key instrument in terms of our information transfer. We do meet with groups frequently. My senior fund advisor is currently in Dunedin, and she'll have 2 days down there talking to 6 groups that we've funded in the past. We have the opportunity to go into biodiversity forums where we talk about our objectives and discuss with potential applicants what sort of opportunities we could have. In terms of the trust itself, they actually benefit in terms of our interaction because they've got a very clear objective, a very focused program.
So an application is submitted and you're notified immediately that it's been received, and then once the funding round closes, you don't actually hear anything more from this fund until approximately 4 months later when the outcome is notified. We do question that. Some other people will actually tell you when you're on a shortlist. From our perspective, we put an awful lot of effort into trying to raise money for salaries. 70% of our need is for salaries, and there's not a lot of funders that will cover that. So it is a question is whether it would be quite good to know, in fact, if we were shortlisted, and if not, obviously we could again engage in more effort in looking further afield. Once we are notified of the outcome, the deed is very simple, very clearly stated conditions.
And from our approach, we certainly have some fairly, I think, clear guides to guide people in terms of applying, got clear criteria. Our systems are designed to provide a quick process. We don't actually have set dates for that process, and that's been interesting feedback from Sue today, or through this process actually. But we do have definitely a very business-like approach. We get 120 applications each round. We currently manage about 600 active files. So if someone asks us or tells us they've got an issue in terms of a contract ending, we are conscious of that. We'll certainly give indication, but it's on an as-required basis. We don't put it out there for everyone. We just don't have the resource.
There's very clear timeframes, deadlines, etc., and notification of changes is very easy to find as well, sometimes even by a phone call. Once announcements are made, there's a lot of attention to that by media or ministerial visits, site visits, etc., and we've been lucky enough to be involved in that quite a bit. And obviously no report, no funds, so that says it all.
From our perspective, the timeframes are variable slightly, but it is not a guaranteed game plan. We do give those broad indications as to when announcements may be made. We've managed to take delegations for approval from the Minister down to Joint CE, down to General Manager. And so the processes that have been involved there have saved me about 6 to 7 weeks through creating the electronic application process. That saved us around about 3 weeks in terms of inputting into our database. So we are working on that and try and make it as quick as possible for applicants.
Yep, so again, simplified, just as Alan said. The explanations how to apply is lengthy, but it's extremely valid and very clear to understand, and you do need to read it. You do have the opportunity to supply additional information in the likes of a covering letter, which is often, we can talk about the funding effort that we've put in over and above this particular application. And if it's a subsequent application, there's no duplication of material, etc., which saves an awful lot of time as well.
Yeah, so in terms of the template application, that was definitely a bureaucrat-driven thing. I was presented with an application form. Come the electronic processing component of it, or the application process though, we put out that first off from the department using our best knowledge, but we did do a survey immediately of users of that service, and we've done a subsequent one since 3 rounds on. So it's very much user driven. We're now up to about 68% of compliance for electronic applications, which is a reasonable percentage compared with other funds at the moment. Yep.
We've generally been successful with our applications, so I can't really comment on how you feel when you're not selected. The amount granted has not necessarily been what we've requested, but the explanations or the shortfalls in that have always been clearly outlined, and even other suggestions made about how we could make those shortfalls. The steps in the decision-making process, as far as we know, are once the application is submitted to the fund, obviously there's a process, and then there's ministerial sign-off. What happens in between, we don't actually know. We know there's committees, local agencies, etc. involved. Does it matter? Is there confidentiality behind it? Don't know. Good question for you to think about. But what we do need to always know is and understand is the priorities that the fund has for biodiversity outcomes nationwide, and obviously regional pictures as well. And I'd just like to say that as part of that, what the Trust has found is that working with a fund like the Biodiversity Fund, the reputation and the alliance to that has had a snowballing success for us with other funding applications.
For me as a fund manager, I see I've got a responsibility to the people who put time into making applications. So all successful and unsuccessful letters are signed out by me personally. There are no cyclostyled letters. If an applicant is partially funded, there's a brief explanation in that letter explaining why it's only a partial funding. Unsuccessful, there should be a good, clear explanation as to why it is not funded. All letters have an invitation to discuss with me on the 0800 line, not to one of the staff. And with key groups, I'll actually phone them. I usually phone between 5 and 6 key applicants who are declined, just to explain to them before they get their letter why they have been declined. Not an easy task, but I see it goes with the turf. These points we haven't really touched in terms of this, so we just skip over them. We hope we use plain English. We do consult on design and delivery, and we do have an actual question in terms of use of data and get clearance to use data from applicants.
Some of the critical factors from our perspective was the relationship that we have with the fund, and that was the relationship at all levels. And as Alan said, the fact that as a manager he is in contact with us as well, the added value that that gives to the organisation. The availability, as I've already touched on from the local department, it's about open communication, the site visits. This fund supports salaries, which for us is a huge thing, so we're always going to consider it. And I think also it's about the proven track record that we have for delivery and accountability. The future? Well, obviously we have a shared vision for species protection. It is an advantage that this particular fund has the complementary advice and condition, which we can apply to in any one round. But we do have real concerns about the sustainability of it, and again I come back to salaries and where do we go for 70% of our requirement should something happen to this fund. And no one single model fits us. And now, compared to 2003 in our first application, we have real competition from several new environmental groups that have opened up in our region.
So in terms of my perspective, in terms of the relationship, we know we're in the same team. There's good communication between both teams. There's a proven performance record of delivery from the Trust, and the Trust displays high ethical and professional standards. And so we actually give them a lot of rope in terms of the delivery and implementation.
Yeah, they do. And I'd just like to finish with some of the achievements from the fund is a protection of a threatened species, which has had a spin-off effect to other species and ecosystems, and we've got a commitment to long-term conservation measures and projects. Thank you.